All right, welcome back, everybody. We're going to pick up our conversation here. Mike, Joel, Justice here on set with me. Justice, you were talking about something, essentially this idea of black boys coming up. Do you remember at what age? Do you remember your boy, that childhood of yours, that as a black boy, when things, I don't know, started to feel like this isn't the way I want it to go, this isn't the way it should be? Or I guess, do we all have a sense that black boys are all coming up a certain way with certain fears, with certain, I don't know, ideas of what we need to become?
Maybe not always.
Yeah.
For me, my black boyhood was really beautiful. I remember like going fishing with my dad, and like my dad is just a very big personality, so doing things like that. But I think it's also, there's like we were talking, you can hold two things. Like there is like that beauty, but there's also that fear of maybe even becoming a man. And as a black man, you are a threat. So
when I was growing up, on my neighborhood, like we were one of maybe 4 blacks on the street, but it didn't feel like we were 4 blacks on the street. My elementary, middle, high school was the same way. And so I've always felt incredibly safe. I felt incredibly loved and nurtured. It actually wasn't until I went to college that I began to see differences. When you start getting asked a question about hair contacts, why do you have the do-rag, the wave grease, the brushing, why do you go to the barber every week, right? And that's when I began to see the dynamics at play. First time I was ever pulled over by police officers was on the college campus. Me and my fraternity brothers, we were 4 of us, we were in a truck, about 4 or 5 police cars surrounded us on campus, pulled us out, made me get out, put my hand on the truck, spread my legs, threatened my frat brother in the front that he was going to take him to jail if we didn't calm down, and we weren't doing anything.
Joel, you hear him say that you in college before you get this idea of race and class. When did it hit you?
Mad early.
Yeah.
It was like and you grew up in the Bronx. The pocket I grew up in, 188th Crescent Avenue, right off of Fordham Road. We're looking at a high proliferation of like it's the entire Caribbean diaspora. You're looking at Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, Haitians, myself, my mother, West Indian, Caribbean, my father, good old country boy from Pensacola, Florida, right? But like we grew up together in these pockets, but the only white presence we had were teachers or police officers. Like that was it. And you don't see the distinction, but it's very clear. So like when I go to middle school and I go to like the gifted program, and like when my other friends who I grew up with don't go to the gifted program, right? And then when I go to LaGuardia High School, one of the best experiences of my life, but it was also the first time I had really had that culture shock, kind of like the culture shock, Mike, that you're talking about. I had white classmates who were also friends. It was the first time I saw, like, I had actual company and friendships with like the queer community, like at least folks who identified as such in that way. So it was, for me, it was like, oh wow, this whole new world and this whole new experience. And even then, growing up as a black boy who had a father in the household, but a father who was also somewhat violent and dangerous in that way. There are things that I think I probably was seeking at that time, and not like in a dangerous way, but very clearly understanding like what blackness looks like and what it doesn't look like, and like how people are in fear of that.
What does it look like now? What's blackness now? What is being black? And I guess I can get more specific into being a black man and black masculinity, but what it looked like then, I'll stay with you here. What it looked like then compared to what you say or what you think it looks like now, blackness?
I think for the first time in a very long time, I think it's so layered and nuanced. Like we're getting to have conversations about a blackness that doesn't exist solely in the space of like, yo, can you play spades? Can you name me all the black movies from the 90s and the 80s and the 70s? Which, I mean, is great and is important, but I think also too, it's like, how are you choosing to identify with that blackness, and also not having that blackness be an identifier for your humanity. Like, I'm a black man, I'm also a human being. I lead with my blackness first and foremost, but I think we are finally opening the doors to like ask the question, like, what kind of black are you? Like, and being able to sit with that and not be judged for what we perceive to be a lack or a need in that way.
Well, Justice, we're asking that of ourselves. We've known, and maybe we're getting better at it as a community, this nuanced blackness, right? We're not looking at everybody and expecting you to be this or be that when we look at our black brothers and sisters. But outside of our community, are you getting that sense that others are looking at us and seeing nuanced blackness?
No, not always. I think with the same thing with college, when I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. It's a conservative red state, right? And moving to New York, I'm thinking, oh my God, everything's gonna be liberal. I'm gonna be able to do all these different things. And then I realized that racism acts very much different here. There's a neoliberalism that like I have to navigate. And I think that still hasn't really changed. I think that nuanced lens is still pretty distant for people outside of the community.
Mike, what do we do with this word? What is masculine now? What is masculinity when we talk about it now? I mean, we can say all day long, well, masculinity doesn't have to be this tough. It could be the guy pushing a stroller and taking care of his kids, and da-da-da-da. But really, is that, I mean, that's a different image. But when we talk about masculinity, men, what are we still talking about today?
It's a really great question. I think it's a very two-part nuance question. I think the natural assumption is masculinity is being tough, having a hard exterior, being athletic, being dominant, being gregarious, being loud, and being bold. I think that is what we think about when we think about the terms of masculinity.
We as in all of us, not just one community.
I think as a society, not just black. I think this is for the white community, for the Latinx community, for the API community. I think that is what we think about men.
Is there an extra stank on it when it comes to black masculinity, though?
Absolutely, and I think that's shifted and shaped by the media. As much as I gave the media a pat on the back for doing this special today right now, I'm also going to critique the media as well, because the media has such a very myopic view of what a black man is. On television right now, you're still either a rapper or an athlete.
Yeah, and I think just to partner with that too, Mike, I think the problem is also when we talk about masculinity, we're generally looking at it through the cis hetero lens, right? Like it's like all the things we're talking about, all the things you just mentioned so beautifully, right? Like dominating, super hyper masculine, like muscular, athletic, tall, like takes care of the home, financially stable, things of this nature, which not to say like they aren't important, but I think it all comes through. And again, media and film play a large part in that. And like how you're supposed to show up as a man, as a masculine man, especially as a black man. And if you don't show up in that way, it then begins, you can also potentially start questioning your own manhood. And the community might do that as well, whether it's internally or even externally. Like if you're not doing these things, then are you really a man? Like it's...
Where are you all seeing anywhere that we are doing a good job of challenging this idea of masculinity? Is there, you were talking about the media, but I mean, in our communities, in our home, is there somewhere you all are seeing good indicators of, yes, we are taking this on and we are challenging this idea that we have?
Go ahead.
Absolutely. I think to what you two are specifically saying too as well, I was thinking about this narrative of the masculinity has range now because social media has allowed us to find our tribes. We now have access to information. So now we do know that black men cry. We do know that black men hike. We do know that black men fly fish. We now know that black men can swim. Right?
You wanted to jump in on, you wrap this point.
I guess in regards to masculinity and manhood, I don't know if those things like coexist. I feel like sometimes masculinity can be like a trap that we're like set to like run after. It's kind of like this bone that's hanging in front of you of like, if you get this, like all these things are gonna happen. And sometimes that masculinity is even made for like black men, right? Like I think of like those same like ideas of dominance and like aggression are so often have to do with like colonization and like white men, and like black men are never going to be white men in those ways. And also thinking about seeing your TED talk about co-parenting, in my mind that was manhood, it wasn't masculinity. And so, and in some way that is queer, that's a queer way of living.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. And I think, I mean, and I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the fact that a lot of the language I've learned as a cis hetero black man, as far as like creating brave spaces, come from the queer community. And I think part of that is because there's a sense of like freedom and not just freedom of expression, but like freedom in spirit that I think I encourage all of us, especially us as black men, to have. It's like, how can we show up in spaces with ourselves, whether it's the barbershop, whether it's the green room, whether it's the block, whatever, and like have intimate conversations, be able to tell you like, yo, I love you, bro, or like, yo, I know you're going through something. Let's unpack that together in a way that doesn't have to feel indifferent. Like, the emotional IQ that's required in order to create space for someone to say like, yo, I'm going through something and I don't have the language for it. So like, how can we unpack that together? Like, to me, that's manhood. Like, that's manly.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.